Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is Elsa, who joins us from the beautiful Canary Islands, where she was born and raised, and you'll come to find out that a place that I have fallen in love with. I absolutely love the Canary Islands, but we don't stop there. She's actually traveled the world via her career with the World Bank and helping developing countries stoke economic activity and do so in a sustainable way. So we learn all about the World Bank. We learn a lot about the developing world. We travel from Papua New Guinea to Latin America to sub-Saharan Africa and a couple more circles around the globe before we get back to the Canary Islands, where she has founded a company called Pueblos Remotos, which is helping remote workers come live, stay, and work in remote areas of the Canary Islands and give back to the local people there while doing so. It's a beautiful mission, really awesome company. Her story is a lot of fun, and I learned a lot along the way. So I hope you'll enjoy this one. I definitely did. Please help me in welcoming Elsa to About Abroad. Hola, Elsa. Bienvenidos to About Abroad. How's it going?
Hola, Chase. Muy bien. Thank you for having me.
It's so cool to finally meet you, and I think we're going to have some fun getting into a couple things that I really love. You don't know this about me yet, but I really love villages. I really love the Canary Islands, and I obviously really love talking about people living in other countries, and you've lived like all over the world. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
I'm sure we will. A lot of things in common.
Yeah. For sure. So, okay, let me just start with this. Where are you right now? I have no idea.
So I'm based in Tenerife, in one of the Canary Islands. Have you been here?
Yeah, I have actually. I spent last winter down there and a little bit of this winter down there. I've kind of fallen in love with the Canary Islands, actually.
So here I am, although I was actually born in Fuerteventura, which is another island. But
and which one are you on now?
Tenerife.
You're in Tenerife. Okay. All right. And where in Tenerife?
In Santa Cruz. That's the capital. Yeah. I grew up here. So
gotcha. You know what's so crazy is how different Santa Cruz is. I mean, I was going to say Santa Cruz from Fuerteventura, like, or Tenerife from Fuerteventura, but like you get like an entire continent on an island on each one of these individual islands, but then they're so distinct from each other and they're like super close to each other.
Definitely. That's the beauty of the Canary Islands, that we have a microclimate. So within Tenerife, only the island where I am right now, you can find all kinds of weathers. You can be up there in El Teide, which is the highest mountain in Spain, with the snow. Actually, it was snowing last night. And you can go down to the beach in the south and sunbathe. So yeah, that's the beauty of it.
How far is that? Like for someone that's never been there before, like, you can see it. Like you can literally, I remember sitting on the beach in Tenerife in La Puerta de la Cruz and looking up and seeing the Tilde, like the snow-capped mountain, which, as you said, is the tallest mountain in all of Spain. But it's like what, like an hour drive?
It's an hour drive. Yeah, that's it's a very small island, but yeah, you have all kinds of views and climates and so on. And then each of the Canary Islands is completely different from each other. As you said, Fuerteventura is like going to the desert, right? You have these sand dunes and so on. If you go to La Gomera, completely different also too. So each of them, when people ask me, where should I go? I'm like, it really depends on what you're looking for. So yeah.
Yeah. I can back you up on this. I have told people that as well. I think I used the continent on an island thing. I didn't make that up for anybody wondering, and I'm not claiming it as my own little phrase that I made up here. That is something that they actually say. I think specifically about Gran Canaria. I might be mistaken there, but they all kind of feel that way, or at least the ones that I've been to, but I haven't been to Fuerteventura. But when you're on these islands, like, it is just really hard, to imagine. For instance, I'm from the Southeast US, so we're used to like the Caribbean islands and the Keys and those islands, and they're beautiful, but they're flat, like tropical, kind of like rocks with beautiful beaches and sand, and it's great in its own way. But it's hard to imagine being on some of these islands, if that's where you're from, and just seeing like, snow-capped volcanoes and right next to that same tropical looking beach with beautiful water. And I mean, I don't know, it's just, and then there's like forests and rolling green mountains and deserts and sand dunes, and it is just kind of insane how that like continent on an island thing is really true, and you can sometimes drive the whole island in an hour.
Exactly. Also the black sand is quite different, and anyway, it's you need to see it, you need to experience it to really understand how they are. So we invite everyone to come to the Canary Islands.
Well, I'm excited we're going to come back to this, I think, a little bit later. We'll get back to like the story of how you returned, because I'm genuinely interested in that. But I wondered if we could spend a few minutes talking about a little bit of your past, because you were born there, you spent some time in the Canaries, but then you've lived all over the world. And I'm kind of curious to know how you were able to do that and the places you've lived and such. So I don't know where you want to start with that. It's a very broad question, or maybe it's not even a question, it's a statement. But could you sort of just tell us a little bit about your past and sort of, where you went from the Canaries and onward from there?
Sure, happy to do so. I will try to summarize it, but yeah, if you have any questions on the way, throw them up. So as you said, I grew up here in the Canary Islands, and then I had the opportunity to study in Madrid. So I moved to mainland Spain, and I lived in Madrid for around 7 years. I studied economics. I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to do with my life back then. I studied economics because, it was what my father said, and it was something I didn't really dislike, but I didn't love. Anyway, I don't regret it because it opened a lot of doors for me. So as I finished economics, I did this master's on international business management. What I did know is that I wanted to live abroad. I wanted to travel the world. That was kind of like my dream. So thanks to this master, I was able to, beforehand, I went on Erasmus to Belgium. That's why I lived in Antwerp and afterwards in Brussels. But I really wanted to go farther away. So thanks to this master I was referring to, I had the opportunity to work for the Embassy of Spain in the US. So that's how I got to Washington, D.C., where I ended up living for 5 years. So I went for this year in the embassy, and I thought it was going to be my year in the US. So I did everything in 1 year. Like I went all over the US, going crazy about this experience and adventure. And actually, it broadened my scope of what I wanted to do in my life, because being there and living in Washington, I learned a lot about the World Bank and the mission of all these NGOs. And I thought, okay, this could be my purpose. I really want to do something meaningful with my job, right? Like I want to support other bigger causes and the developing countries. So thanks to this program, which is part of the government of Spain, apart from the master working in the embassy, I could, for the second phase, I could work for an international organization such as the World Bank. In my year, there were 3 positions, and that's how I got into one of them. So I stayed in the US for 5 years. So I was like, okay, I did everything now. No, I'm kidding. There is always stuff to do in the US. It's so big. So I started working for the World Bank. I was based in the US, but I was traveling like 75% of my time. I was focused back then on helping SMEs, so micro, small, and medium enterprises, to get access to finance in those countries, right? In developing countries. So I was covering most of sub-Saharan Africa. So my countries were Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, Ghana, and some others in Southern Africa.
Wait a second. So you were based in the U.S. and so you're from the Canary Islands, just right there, and they're sending you from the U.S. over to sub-Saharan Africa. Like, I mean, for people who are not familiar with where the Canary Islands are, like, take a second and Google it real quick. It's right there off the coast of Morocco, and I mean, you're right there. So, okay, all right.
So yeah, that's the ironic part of it. But yeah, and that's, and probably, I don't know if everybody knows what the World Bank is, but it's one of these big international organizations that which mission is to support the development of shared prosperity and support the development of developing countries, right? So my team was a global team, and we would cover different regions. So I was in charge of Africa. That's why I was back and forth. But then I was also in charge of Latin America. So some of the countries in Central America, like Haiti, like Costa Rica, Haiti, and then Colombia and some others. So that was part of my time in the World Bank. But then I
would love to know actually a little bit more about that. I've people, when you say you worked for the World Bank, I go, okay, I know what that is, but I guess I don't really know the depths of it. Like I know about as much as what you've said, which is that it's there to help support developing countries. And is it mainly getting them access to financing? Small, like you were specifically working on small businesses. So does this somewhere bridge the gap with like microfinance and helping entrepreneurs get access to financing, or is there a bit more to it than that? Or
that was only my area, right? The World Bank is huge. It covers many different aspects, from water access to water to energy, housing, finance is a big area. You have even tourism. You have, imagine all the different aspects that you need to run a country, but you need help with, right? So you have teams within the World Bank. I was part of it, but they are like 15,000 people working on, we have 8 buildings in DC, but then you have teams and offices in most of these developing countries, right?
Wow.
So you have, as I said, different areas and everyone specializes in one of those. I was for the first 6 years, I was focused on finance, as I said, on that specifically. And I was working together with central banks and ministries of finance of those countries, plus the banks, the commercial banks, to facilitate this access to credit, right? But that's just a small piece of what the World Bank does. So I could give a talk of like 2 hours is talking about what the World Bank does, but just for you to have an idea. That's
okay. Could you maybe like illustrate with an example of something you would be working on in, say, sub-Saharan Africa? Like, is it? I guess what I would love to know is like, where do the people on the ground actually? Is it just these big institutions talking to each other, or is there like like a goat herder at the end who's like going to get to expand his goat herding practice?
Right. Most of the times it gets up there, institution to institution, and it's hard to see the actual impact. In my projects, they were very long, so I could see a little bit of everything. I had a lot of the blah, blah talk up there, but then when you get hands-on, we would do trainings and we would set up financial schemes for very small entrepreneurs. So I remember some of them getting funds or getting financing for buying these tuk-tuks, the small transportation, or to set up their small business. I mean, but all that has to be done with all of these stakeholders working together, right? So that's the difficulty, but also seeing the local government and the local clients trying to honor this and promoting this type of financing in their own country was my reward. But we had to pass laws. We had to, it's a very complicated type of project. But so it was ironic to live in DC and then travel to all these countries, right? So I was like, I was on a point where I told my manager, I really want to experience this on the ground. I want to go to one of the offices because I think the real work is there, living in that country.
You were kind of like stepping in and then stepping back out, and like you couldn't really get your like hands dirty.
Exactly. And it's like, for me, it was a reality check when I would go to these countries, but then you get out and you kind of forget how privileged you are and how we just complain about trivial things. So I really wanted to experience on the ground this type of work. And my manager, I was covering Africa and Latin America, and he had the idea of sending me to Morocco in Middle East and North Africa. And I'm like, no, he said first Egypt or Jordan. I'm like, no, I don't speak Arabic. I'm not going there. As a single woman, I don't feel like. And then when he came back and said, what about Morocco? I'm like, okay, well, I speak French. I would feel more comfortable. It's so close to the Canary Islands. Finally, I'm going to be close to home. So I said, okay. And I went for a year, and I actually stayed for 2 years working from Morocco, still working on the same type of projects, but covering Africa and Middle East, so Lebanon and Tunisia and some other countries in that area. And it was as a personal experience was huge, right? Like I learned a lot, plus professionally too. And I actually was easier because I was in more or less the same time zone. So it made it easier for me, but still I was not fulfilled. I'm like, I like this, but if I could apply all of this to sustainable tourism, which is my passion, that was my passion, and I never had the opportunity to work on that. So then is when I decided to take a break after the 2 years in Morocco, and I got into this specific master on sustainable tourism in Australia. And you're going to ask, why Australia?
I thought you were about to jump straight to the Canary Islands from there, and I was like, I know there's a chapter missing here. Okay, it's Australia. Got it.
Yes. So why Australia? Well, I did a lot of research asking.
You were so close to home. You were almost there, and then you just said, no, I'm going to go to the other side of the world.
Exactly. How life is just, you never know. Anyway, I actually did a research asking a lot of tourism experts what would they recommend, and I ended up choosing this master's. And I said, okay, if I get in, I will actually take the time to do it in person and go there. And because one of my dreams was to live in Australia, so I'm like, I'm just gonna, two birds, one stone. I'm like, I'm just gonna do it all. So yeah, I moved to Melbourne first, and I started doing my master's. And I remember the first day, the teacher, one of the professors that I really love, he was like, welcome to this master, and be ready because you are not gonna enjoy your holidays anymore. And I'm like, okay. And it's true. Oh my God. Since then, every time I travel, I question everything so much. I'm questioning, how are they treating the employees? What are they doing with the resources? How they are managing, all the tourism value chain and so on. So I got so specialized in tourism, and I was enjoying my classes for the first time in my life. And Australia is it's beautiful, and I love it there. The point is that even when I asked for a leave without pay from the World Bank, I could still work as a consultant, as an external consultant for them. And I knew there were a lot of nice projects going on from the Sydney office, working in tourism in the Pacific Islands. So I started knocking doors, and once I finished my master's, they let me go there and work for the office in Sydney. And I got into very nice projects in the Fiji Islands and PNG, Papua New Guinea, for those of you who haven't.
I didn't know what that meant.
I know we use a lot of acronyms, so Papua New Guinea. Yeah, and that was amazing, having that opportunity, working on sustainable tourism development. And look at this. I started to see everything aligned, like these islands are starting to develop, right? What about if we do things right with them? If we help them don't make the same mistakes that mature destinations such as the Canary Islands or Hawaii or the Maldives have already made,
Mistakes like what?
Like over-tourism, like destroying areas of the islands that cannot be recovered anymore, pushing for mass tourism, don't thinking about the local well-being, the local community well-being. So these are the things that new destinations need to take into account. How are we going to do this without compromising our natural resources, without compromising the life of the people who are here, who are from here, and who need to also benefit from these, right?
Yeah. And who are you consulting in that case? Like that has to, I'm just envisioning you like standing in Papua New Guinea, a girl from the Canary Islands who's now working in Sydney, and like now you're talking to somebody in Papua New Guinea, and like I'm just wondering like what that looks like. Like are you talking to like a local hotel owner? Are you talking to the mayor of the town, or like are you out giving speeches? Like what does this look like on the ground? I'm totally fascinated by this.
It's a mix of everything that you said. So it depends on what phase of the project we were in. We would be talking to the entrepreneurs, to the accommodation places. We were helping them also to monitor, the expenses and how they could be more sustainable. How we can connect the local accommodations with the local suppliers, right? We did that a lot in Fiji Islands too, so that hotels don't have to depend on importing all these goods, but can, help locals also and get all locally sourced. From that to talking to the Minister of Tourism on developing new policies, to talking to the tourism board to see how we can target the specific market that we want to attract to these islands, right? Do we want to be Bali, where you have all these Australians going crazy there, party and so on? With, the big problem in Bali, for example, is that locals don't have enough water to water their rice fields, because all this water is being diverted to the hotels, to the infinity pools, and so on. Plus, it's full of trash everywhere. But you, as a tourist, do you ask yourself what's going on? Most people don't ask themselves.
Yeah, not normally.
So those are the things that are happening behind the scenes, and none of us realize.
Something that kind of like strikes me as interesting is in this role with the World Bank and like your role in all this. And is that sometimes like economic development and sustainability kind of butt heads. They don't have to, but they often don't go together hand in hand. I mean, you just, talking about like, yeah, Bali's got an amazing, pretty amazing economy by the standards of islands who want to attract tourists. And you've got people coming from all over the world spending lots of money from other countries. Economically, you could say that's really good. But from a sustainability standpoint, as you said, locals can't water their rice fields because their water's going to infinity pools. And so these two things don't go hand in hand. So we'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this, because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers. So they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, so many of you write in asking how to support the show best. And if you are listening and made it this far into the episode, then I'm going to presume that perhaps you're one of those people that wants to help. So if that's the case, the best thing you could do right now would be to open up the app that you're currently using to listen to this episode. Go to the little arrow thing that allows you to share, select it, and share it to one of your social media networks. That would be a huge, huge help. You can feel free to tag me at DC Warrington, and I'll slap you a virtual high five from wherever I am in the world. Thank you so much for the support. We really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy listening to the rest of this episode. Okay, now back to the episode. If the World Bank is there to kind of stoke the economic flames of a country, I can imagine it can be really hard to also approach that from a sustainability standpoint and say, hey, hotel owner in this place that's really trying to attract tourism, also let's do this very sustainably. Was that a challenge that you faced often?
Definitely. You are absolutely right. It was a challenge that I still face nowadays. And also because when you talk about development, and that was something I would ask myself every single day, is like, what does development mean? Does it mean to be like the US and like Europe? What are we trying to do with these countries? Maybe they are happy as they are. Why do we have to push for development? Because development is equal to numbers, to having more, to, whereas we have forgotten about the quality of the people that visit us. When you talk to the ministries of tourism, and they just focus on, oh no, this number of tourists arrive. Does it really matter, the number of tourists? Or is it better if we focus on the quality of the tourism that it comes and the receipts that they provide, that they contribute to? So it's a completely change of mindset, and it's super, super difficult and hard. But that's the beauty of it too, that you are on that path of trying to make this happen.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, it's not easy at all, but I think it can be, doing things sustainably can also be a stimulus for the economy as well. So it just depends on how you approach it. But I imagine that could be a tough sell at times.
And then I think I had to go all the way to Australia and work in these Pacific Islands to realize, what have I done for my own islands? What have I done for the Canary Islands, right? Like, then is when I started to ask myself, if I could apply everything that I'm learning back home and stop this mass tourism development that we have and dependency that we have on this tourism, right? So then is when I started thinking, what about if I go home? For the first time in 16 years, I was asking myself, what about going home? So
was that scary? Or is that kind of like, did you feel like you were getting off the adventure train, like, and like, okay, I'm heading back home, or was it just pure enthusiasm?
It was both. I was scared. It was kind of like a relief for feeling that finally, because every time I would come back home for holidays or whatnot, they will be asking me, my friends, my family, so when are you coming back? I'm like, these people, they haven't understood that I'm not coming back. And so feeling that for the first time, I was like, actually, I need to listen to my body, and my mind this time. So I was so scared though of coming back and not finding my place and not knowing what to do, that I actually negotiated to keep working remotely with Australia. So I resigned from my position in DC. I negotiated with my boss in Australia and I moved back home working remotely, right? So that didn't work as I was thinking, because time difference was huge. I had to give presentation at 4 a.m. in the morning. I had to, calls at midnight. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. So I was more in that area of the planet than here. I had to spend 2 months in Fiji, 1 month in Hawaii, and I was like, this is not working. So I was like that for like 6 months, and then I started seeing also opportunities here. And then I started also meeting a lot of the local entrepreneurs and ecosystem in the island, and I started working on different projects here. I set up myself as a freelance / small entrepreneur, and I started working for the government here on this project to attract more digital talent to the island, remote workers, digital nomads, startups, precisely to diversify from that dependency that we have on mass tourism. So I was working for the tourism board here, and I was also managing the sustainability tourism plan for the island of Canary. So both projects I really love, but I thought the local administration in this country, because we belong to Spain, right, was going to be more efficient. And, I don't know why I had that idea, because I was so used to work for developing countries' administrations, then I had some hope that this was going to be a bit better. But actually, it's probably sometimes worse, the bureaucracy, because when you have a mindset so much structured and for so many years, it's so difficult to change. Whereas if you're building something from scratch, it's sometimes way easier,
You don't have to break things down to rebuild them. In that case, there's just nothing there. And when you have to it's like if you have like an old house that you're like, it's fine, it works, we can stay here, but it would be like, we could just start from scratch. We wouldn't have this, sometimes you wish you could just start from scratch.
Exactly. So then I moved back to the Canary Islands 3 years ago. So for the first 2 years, I was working on these projects I just mentioned after I left the Australian contract. And then talking to my business partner now, Carlos, who I met the first week I moved back on this event with digital nomads, we were discussing, what can we do for the rural areas? Because we were having all these news going on about the empty Spain, about how all these rural areas are depopulated. We were thinking on how can we apply this to the Canary Islands, because as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, the islands are so small that towns or villages are not that isolated, right? You can be in 15 minutes drive, you can be in an urban area where you can find all the services. So the rurality here is different, but still they are forgotten, let's say. They are not visible to the public or even to the tourists, right? So we were like, what can we do for for these local entrepreneurs that are, fighting each day with these small projects, sustainable, innovative, but nobody's listening to them. Nobody's acknowledging them. So that's how we started developing what it is my main project right now, and where I'm focusing my 100% of my energy. And it's actually a combination of everything we have been talking about today. And it's called Pueblos Remotos. In English, it would be remote villages or remote towns. And what we're doing is focusing on reactivating these areas by bringing small groups of remote workers that are looking forward to give back to the local community that they are visiting. So we organize experiences. These small groups come for 3 weeks where they can keep working remotely, but they have the opportunity to collaborate directly and immerse themselves in the life of these local projects that we have pre-selected. So after the 3 weeks, we see all these connections within, the remote workers with the local entrepreneurs, and the local entrepreneurs among them as well. And we call that the connected rurality, because at the end of the day, it's connecting people with people, right? Like making those, and a lot of synergies and ideas come up, and that's what we are focusing on right now.
I love it. So let's illustrate for people who are trying to envision this. So you've got an entrepreneur on Tenerife who's got something like a finca, like a big home or a winery or something like that?
Yeah, it could be, for example, the ones we work, because everything happens in the same municipality, let's say, in the same area, because we want the socioeconomic impact. We want it to stay in the same area, right? To benefit the local community. So the projects we collaborate with are pretty small, but they are super passionate about what they do. So for example, we have worked with this beekeeper, is 30-year-old girl that is really passionate about bees, and she produces her own honey, and she also produces these beeswax wraps, for the food, so that it doesn't go bad. And you can experience everything with her, right? And she's amazing. She won the award for the best entrepreneur in 2020, young entrepreneur.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's cool. That's awesome that she won, like, in a day of tech products and apps and stuff I'm like,
exactly.
Yeah, give it to the beekeeper. I like that.
Exactly. Going back to the roots, right? So then the winery, for example, is a ecological wine, and it's this guy by himself. He plants everything. He produces his own wine. There is also a farm, which is also Tony, who is the owner, and is her by herself doing everything again. So we try to support people that are really wanting to change the landscape, to also fight for their own traditions. For example, when we did the edition in Fuerteventura, we have only done 2 until now. The second one was in Fuerteventura. We try to really showcase the authenticity of the place. So we work, for example, with a cheese maker, who does everything super traditionally. We work with an animals refugee. So it's a refugee for farm animals that have been abandoned or mistreated. Yeah. So it's a mix of also with olive production, aloe vera product. So everything that is artisan manually done and authentic is what we work with. Yeah, and now we are launching the 3rd edition that is going to happen in La Palma.
I love La Palma, La Isla Bonita, the pretty island.
And that's for a big reason, because it's beautiful, but also probably people know it because of the recent volcano, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people suffering from this. So we wanted to really support La Palma with a small action. But, nowadays I just tell myself, if we all, do something to change, we are moving forward, right? Like sometimes we are like, why am I going to do this? This is not going to change anything. No, if we all get into
it. It takes a lot of 1% efforts. Like we want to believe we're going to, swing this big stick and change the world with it, all at once. But in reality, it's a lot of little 1% changes here and there that make the difference over time, I think.
There you go.
Yeah. And I mean, La Palma is such an amazing place to visit. Like it's incredible, just I would, that sounds like an ideal place to go if you're going to combine like sort of a vacation with giving back and, meeting with other remote workers and enjoying a place, that sounds pretty idyllic. I wanted to ask you, so how I'm envisioning people coming, like let's just say you've got a remote working, are they normally groups? Like, is it normally like a collective that already knows each other? Or is it more of, individuals that just happen to band together in this one kind of like co-living experience for a week or for 3 weeks?
Yeah, good question. So for now, until now, what we have had are individual freelancers or people that work remotely that they don't know each other. So that's also the beauty of it, because, you just come and start meeting people for the first time and you get all this bonding and so on. And La Palma is going to be like that too. So we are right now in the communications campaign to get people to sign up. So we're looking for remote workers actively, but we are thinking of opening other experiences or replicating previous experiences for teams that already know each other. So it could be a team of a company. It could be a group of friends, remote workers that want to experience this. Because at the end is the combination of you can still work, but you have the possibility of giving back, right? And enjoying, of course, connecting with the environment and getting to know these beautiful islands. So for now, it's for freelancers, but we are willing or looking into other options right now.
Cool. And where do you stay? Like, what kind of accommodations are you putting people up in? Because I feel like this is, from the pictures that I've seen and stuff, this is where it gets really juicy and fun.
Yeah, and we are really happy with the place in La Palma. We try the places to also represent the history of the authenticity of the place, right? So they tend to be rural accommodation with all of them have a history behind. And the place in La Palma is this beautiful big house. There are 3 houses because it's difficult to find capacity in this accommodation in the rural areas we tend to work with between 8 and 12 people. So there is the big house, a smaller house, and another one which is very close by. But the big house used to be the town hall of this village. Right now, it's not anymore. But all of them, and it was burned down with this fire in late 90s, and it was rebuilt. And all the wooden work inside is done by the owner. So he's a carpenter and he did the work himself. Can you believe it?
Wow.
And the views are amazing with the sunset every day right there because you can look at the ocean, but it's also surrounded by nature. So it's amazing, the place.
Which side of the island is it? Is it on like Tazacorte or on like?
No, this is in Fuencaliente. It's in the south, the southern tip of La Palma, and it's very close to the volcano area. So we will be doing an activity with the people affected by the volcano, and we will also be donating some of the revenues to one of the local associations.
I love how one of my favorite things about this podcast when I get to talk to like entrepreneurs like yourself is like kind of understanding their why. Like, why did you get into whatever it is that you're doing? And when somebody has a really strong why, it's very inspiring. And so I love hearing like your story took you from the Canary Islands like to all these different places around the world, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, living in Morocco, Australia, all throughout the world, working for the World Bank, helping countries raise their floor and figure out how they could do things in a sustainable way, but also stoke that economic development that they're looking for. And then to like kind of bring that all back to where it started for you and to be building these individual, relatively small projects where you're like, okay, we're going to help this beekeeper. We're going to help this one small vineyard, and seeing that how that little 1% can add up. And I can see your face, the audience can't, but it like really lights you up. And it's very, very cool to kind of connect all those dots. And I hope people like, if anything, like whether that, people listening, if they want to go on this trip and join you and come to the Canary Islands, like that's awesome. But also like maybe it will inspire people who also have some interest in their home place. I think one of the very cool things that remote work does that maybe doesn't get talked about enough is that it can really help support these rural communities and, developing countries. Yes, by giving knowledge workers the ability to, get a job in a far off place, but also by tourism moving to places like this, where, you don't have to just go to a mega resort for 5 days and then shoot back home. You can actually go and live and work in rural La Palma for a month or two and invest your tourist dollars there. So there's so many cool little levers to be pulled with all this. And I love that you're facilitating it. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I think, and then you've summarized it pretty well. I was about to cry listening to what I've done, but yeah, I didn't realize all of this until I was back doing what I'm doing, right? Now I see that I had to go through that process to be able to give back to my own community. And give back, I think, is the key word here, because it doesn't matter where you're at home, at your hometown, whether you're traveling, whether you are on a business trip, it doesn't matter. We just need to focus on giving back and respect the place we are visiting at that moment or we are living in at that moment, and think about how we can contribute to improve that place, right? Because sometimes we just focus on ourselves and we forget about it. That has been my story and my travel around the world. And I hope, as you said, that I could inspire some people. When I moved back, it was not that easy for me. I tried to find my way. I had to really say, okay, if the administration is not doing what I think it should be done, I'm going to do it myself. And sometimes we just need to do that, do it the way we think it should be done, and not wait for anybody to help us or to support us or to tell us what to do. We sometimes know what we have to do, and we just have to go for it.
Yeah, I love it. You got to roll up your sleeves and just do it yourself sometimes. And the Canary Islands are lucky to have you doing that. Elsa, thank you so much for sharing the story and for sharing Pueblos Remotos with us. Where can people go to learn more about either you or the company or both? We'll put these links in the show notes as well, so people can go there with a quick click. But while they're listening, it's great to tell them as well.
Perfect. Yeah. And thank you, Chase, for having me. Really love talking to you. And if people want to know more, it's easy. It's pueblosremotos.com is our website. And so Pueblos Remotos is under my small company that is called Futural Tourism, because I want people to understand there is a different way of doing tourism or visiting places. So they can find me in both, or they can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm happy to talk to anyone that might be interested.
Awesome. Well, if you want to get in touch with Elsa, if you want to go visit a Pueblo Remoto in the beautiful Canary Islands, which if you haven't gathered from my conversation here, I love. I should have said this in the beginning, but I'm just totally fascinated by the fact these islands are very far from mainland Spain and Europe, and they retain a lot of European vibes. But at the same time, you're way out in the middle of the Atlantic in a lot of ways. You're right off the coast of Africa. You're way, way closer to Morocco than you are to anything in Europe. And there's this just very interesting mixture of culture and food, and I mentioned already the landscapes that are beautiful, but just the architecture, everything's just a little bit, it's very, very unique. And you mix that in with the microclimates. I mean, it can change in 15 minutes. You can go from, La Laguna there up the road from you, and you can go from Santa Cruz up to La Laguna, and the temperature will drop by 20 degrees Fahrenheit in 10 minutes. And it might be raining there and super sunny down on the beach in Santa Cruz. And it's just, I don't know, it's a super unique place. And so anyway, I'm a big fan.
Well, you are welcome anytime, Chase. Hope to see you soon.
I also love queso de la plancha con mojo and patatas arrugadas, the wrinkled potatoes. That's my other guilty pleasure. So thank you so much, Elsa. We'll speak again soon. Have a great rest of the day.
Looking forward to. Take care. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.